I'm the only one who can do some of these tasks. And then so it's like even myself, as they say, the cobbler's children has no shoes at times.
Right.
Like you have to get out of your own head to be like, I am not the only one that can do this.
Welcome back to this episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. I'm your host, Cord Zoen, founder of Bake More Pies. And today we're joined by Jamie Van Cuyk. She is the founder and CEO of Growing Your Team and the host of the Growing Your Team podcast. Thank you for joining us, Jamie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I love having local guests. It's, most of the time we're doing these interviews over Zoom, and it's always better, in my opinion, when we have a conversation in person.
Yeah, I love it. When I was given the option, I was just like, okay, even though I have to cross the bridge to get here,
the dreaded
bridge, I'm going to come and do it in person. Because yeah, you're right. Like most of them are virtual, and I do so many podcasts, and I think there's maybe been only 2 other ones that have been in person.
Wow. And you've done almost 270 podcasts now.
Yeah. For my own podcast, we are just under 270 episodes, and all those have been actually virtual. But yeah, I've also done a lot of guesting on podcasts.
That's really cool to hear. What we do here is marketing. And so learning about how people use like a podcast vehicle to grow their business is pretty cool. And so it sounds to me like it's really helped your business grow.
Yes, it has really helped my business grow. My business, I get a lot of my work through referrals and just networking and getting to know people. I work with small businesses doing hiring stuff. And so small businesses aren't hiring all the time. So it's really about building those relationships and knowing that someone I meet today might not need my services for 2 years, but how do you continue that relationship going? And podcasts have really allowed me to deepen a lot of those relationships. I'll be on people's podcasts, then I'll invite those hosts onto my podcast at times. And it just allows us to have a lot more of those conversations and get to know each other and really get to know how each other works and what our expertise is. Also, when people refer their clients or their business friends and everything to me, people will go and listen to my podcast and feel like they know me before they ever get on a call with me. So it's been a great marketing tool. So even though I don't do sponsorships, and I will say I don't directly earn money from my podcast, right, it's a lot of that indirect revenue that comes in through my podcast.
Well, in my opinion, it's one of the best ways. I mean, the reason I do it is because, in my opinion, you're able to build trust at scale. I mean, it's hard to fake anything for 45 minutes, an hour, or whatnot. Right. So like, this is really me. This is really how I think about things. And so like, if somebody wants to get an opinion on how I'm going to approach a problem or the culture of this agency, how we do things, looking at this podcast is a great way to learn it.
Yep, exactly.
So, well, let's get into it. So you're an expert on hiring people and working with small businesses.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been running this business, I think a little over 7 years now, and we really help small businesses with the hiring process. Right before I started this business, I was trying to figure out what exactly do I want to do. I knew I wanted to do something with consulting, and really learned then that most small business owners never hired before doing it within their own business. And they really didn't know what to do. They were going through hiring and firing cycles, wasting a lot of time, money, and energy on having the wrong people on their teams. And I was like, wait, I know how to do this and I know how to teach it. Let me teach you, so that way you don't have to waste years on bad hires to get the people that you need to grow and scale your business.
So how does that work? So what are the types of businesses that you help most often? Or is there a category, or is it pretty much any small business?
We are not category and industry specific, because what we really focus on is the individual position inside that organization. So we can hire an administrative assistant in company A in industry A, and then we go to company B in that same industry, and their administrative assistant, they feel like they're doing the same tasks, but who we're looking for is completely different. So we're starting over from scratch. So we are not industry specific. We really focus on small businesses where the business owner is ready to let go of tasks for the first time. So they might have a team, but there's things that they've been holding on to where they're like, I got to do these tasks. This is my job. And now they're like, okay, it's time for me to let go of this task so I can really grow my business. So for example, right now we're working with a company that the business owner has been doing pretty much all the sales. Some of their senior leaders have been doing some sales as well, but they've been in business 8 years and he's been the main salesperson. And he's come to the point in time where he said, I can't be the CEO and the sales director at the same time. I need a sales team in my business. So we're helping him find his first fully dedicated sales team member.
Are you spying on my business? Because that sounds a lot like my business.
Yeah. Yeah, and it happens. It's everything. Like, so we help everyone going from hiring your very first assistant type role, where so it's their first employee in a business, all the way up to some of those senior positions where it's just like, okay, it's time to let go. I can trust someone to take on these higher level tasks.
Well, it sounds to me like when you're, especially when you're dealing with very small businesses, that's way more than just helping somebody hire the right people. It sounds like a big part of that is helping them identify all the tasks that get done. I mean, a lot of times that when you're in it, I mean, you're like this close to getting things done as a small business entrepreneur. And so things just get done.
Yeah.
But when you have somebody come in and help you understand your processes and like the workflow of how things get done, then you can really start to figure out, okay, well, what are these skills that this person needs?
Yeah.
What is our culture? What do we actually need, right?
Yeah, exactly. I work with so many clients where they're like, well, we're a small business. We don't have a culture yet. And I'm like, yes, you do. I'm like, when you're a business of one, you have a culture. You have your way that you work with clients. You have your way that you like to get things done. That when you bring someone else in, you still expect things to get done that way. You still expect your clients to be treated in a similar way. You still expect a lot of things when you bring someone else into it. I'm like, and that's your culture. A lot of people also think culture is, oh, is this someone I want to go and have a cup of coffee with on the weekends? We're like, no, that's not it. You might become friends with the people you hire. You might not, and you might only work together. But what does it mean to work together seamlessly in your organization versus the person that you're going to go home and want to rip your hair out because they're not doing things the way you want them done. It doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. They're just not the way you want it done.
Yeah, it sounds like everything I used to hear my dad say when he got home from work when I was growing up. You know, it's like the first thing he would do, as sad as this is, that he would come in, you hear like a deep breath. He's like so happy to be home. And the first thing he does, he walks to like this wet bar he had in the den and he pours himself like a bourbon. And it's like, sits down, it's like, hey, Dad, what, you know? And he's like, well, you know, my people. And he complains about like, and he worked in construction. So it was, they don't load the trucks right in the morning for the job that they're about to go. So like pieces have to, you know, he's just complaining and like, and it's like, I grew up hearing a lot about these things. So that when I knew when I was going to be an entrepreneur, I was like, man, that's one thing that I'd like to have a better handle on. Because it felt a lot of times like he was just kind of going like by the seat of his pants. Like, you know, he really didn't have a plan. He was just kind of feeling his way through it. But it seems like if you put a little thought into it, it's not, you don't have to feel your way through it. Like you can solve it a little easier.
Yeah. So with the hiring, we really focus on what does it mean to do this job well? What does success look like? And then let's find the person who can reach that level of success. Because, you know, as I kind of mentioned, like a position of the same title in another company has different measurements of success. What's going to make me happy with a team member of a certain title is probably going to be different than what makes you happy of a team member with that title. So you really need to know this person's going to do X, Y, Z tasks, but what does that actually look like? How does it impact my business? How does it make me happy? What does it mean to do it well enough where I'm just like, yes, that was worth paying someone for those tasks.
So is that the first step to really figure out what the tasks are?
Yeah. So you need to figure out what the tasks are. A lot of times, because we work with small businesses that these tasks have never been handed over yet to somebody, I always say, don't stress too much about trying to figure out what that exact process looks like, what those handoffs are going to look like. We need to know it roughly, but I don't want my business owners getting too far into the weeds with that, because what you envision a process being and then what it actually is going to be once you have someone there working alongside you is probably going to be, it's going to look different. You're going to forget steps and things like that. But we really need to figure out what are the overall general tasks and some of those minor tasks that go along with it. If you find someone that can do the bigger tasks, those minor tasks they're most likely going to be able to do as well. But we really just have to figure out what is the essence of the role and then who is going to work well in that role.
That's a good point, because you really don't want to be a micromanager either. And so if you've defined out every single last little task to the nth degree, you're not leaving a lot of slack there for the person who's now going to focus on it to innovate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really hard thing for many business owners to do and kind of think through, because you have your way of doing it and your way has gotten you to this level of success. So you're like, this is the way it has to be done. It's also my way. I built this, so it should be done this way. And we have a really hard time like letting go of things and letting someone else do it differently. So with hiring, we also have to then focus on, well, eventually once I get this person, I need to onboard and train them And so I always ask the question of, well, what does it mean to do this task right? And why does that mean it's right? And if all you can think of for that why is because I said so,
oh gosh,
or that's the way I've always done it,
yeah,
then that's an area where you need to say, okay, we need to get to this outcome, but the path to get there might look different once I have someone else on the team and they're doing it. They might bring in knowledge that I don't have, which means the way that they're going to suggest actually saves us time, which saves us money. And being willing to say that someone else might have a better way, and my way worked to get us here, but it might not work to get us to the next level.
That's pretty wise advice. I mean, my favorite around these topics is a book called The E-Myth that you may have heard of. And it talks a lot about, and it's kind of funny because they actually talk a lot about baking more pies in the book. And it talks about a story, or it has a story of a woman who wants to start a bakery. And so she's baking all the pies, she's doing all the invoicing and all of that. And it goes through her realizing that these are very different functions over here, maybe in accounting or in sales or in the actual production of the pies. And ultimately, by the end of the book, she's got a factory. I mean, it's rocking and rolling, and she has certain freedom or whatnot. Because if you don't hire somebody, if you don't set up your business or early or thinking about your business that, hey, eventually these things are going to have to be delegated for us to grow at all, then you get stuck in this sort of paradox of you started the business. This is what the E-Myth all is like, as an entrepreneur, it's like you have total control over your time. I'm going to have all this freedom. And then what ends up happening is you end up working 80 or 90 hours a week. And it's like, and people can get burned up real easy after, you can do that for a year or two, maybe. But after a while, if you can't figure out how to delegate, like, that's it.
Yeah, it's why do you want to work 80 hours, 90 hours a week? You say we have this freedom, but you really don't if you're working that much. You're bringing your work with you on vacation. You're going to attend events for your kids at their school, but you're probably checking your email a million times while you're there. I know just a few years ago, I did Leadership St. Pete, and I remember we were going on our trip up to Tallahassee, and I'm working the entire way up there on the bus ride as everyone else is just relaxing and having a good time. Now, a lot of them weren't business owners, but they were, even the ones that were, they're like, well, I built it so I could have time off. And I was just like, why didn't I do that? At that point in time, I had a team member that I could have relied more on, but I still didn't because I was so stuck in that cycle of I'm the only one who can do some of these tasks. And then so it's like even myself, as they say, the cobbler's children has no shoes at times. Right. Like you have to get out of your own head to be like, I am not the only one that can do this. I need to be willing to let go. I need to be willing to delegate because I can't do everything, have a life, and grow and scale my business.
So let's dig into that, because that is such an important aspect of how to grow a business, is understanding that, number one, that you have to let go of things. Number two, you have to have the leadership ability to give people the tools they need in order to do those things, whether it's onboarding, documentation, training, whatever it is. But you have to have the leadership to where that person has the freedom to make mistakes. They have to learn, to grow, to improve the job. And I mean, to me, for me, that's been a big part of my growth as a business owner, is understanding like where I truly need to spend my time with my team versus what I originally did.
Yeah. So I think that's such a great topic, because it's one of those things we don't want to go from doing the tasks ourselves to now just replacing all that time with managing the tasks. When we go to hire, we want to get work off our plate so we can do something different. And just managing people is not it. We need to focus on those higher level tasks. We need to focus on those revenue generating tasks. But we still need to manage our team. So it's about finding that balance. And when you've really hired the right people for you, managing is easy. It still takes time, but it's easy because you should be getting the right people in who can do the task the way that you need to get them done. With it, we really need to remember that we need to onboard and train our team members. I always say this is the forgotten part of hiring, because people are like, well, I hired an expert. I hired someone who's done this type of role before. I'm good. Day one, I'm going to show them how to log into systems and we're good. And I'm always like, no, no, no. Onboarding is more than day one. It's not a day one orientation where you teach them the systems and show them where the bathroom is if you're in person and then you're good. Onboarding is a process, and typically it takes weeks. And I know people are always confused about that. They're like, but I hired an expert. I didn't hire someone who's entry level. Why does it take so long? And part of it is they have to learn your processes,
right.
and they have to learn your expectations. They have to learn about your clients. They have to learn about whatever it is that they're touching inside your business. If we think about not that it's a simple job, but accounting is accounting is accounting. Like the practices of accounting are the same no matter where you are, unless you're telling your person to cook the books, which hopefully you're not doing.
Oh my goodness.
And so it is the same thing, but that person needs to know about your products and services that you're selling, what's going to be coming through, how you price things, how you like to get reports. Are you someone who is going to be in there every day? You want to see how things are every week? Or you're only going to look at things when they sit you down and force you to look at things? What is your level of understanding? Do you know what you're looking at where they could just send you a report? Or do they need to actually explain things to you? So there's different ways of that same highly skilled person needs to maybe operate differently for you than for their old boss. And that's part of onboarding and training.
That makes perfect sense. Let's talk. I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm going to ask you to maybe share a story of where you were working with someone, maybe the person didn't have a full grasp. You really were able to help them understand where they could delegate. And now maybe they're 10 employees, 12 employees down the road, and they're really figuring it out.
Yeah. So, that is a great question. Okay. So, so I had a client. They owned 2 franchise locations, and they were having a really hard time with the locations because their employees are like, my employees aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Every time I show up, like nothing is done. And they had 2 locations, like I can't split my time and be in each one.
But off the rip, like what you're saying is like they have franchise locations. So in theory, there's a formula for running these businesses. Yep. So they shouldn't have to figure all these things out, but it's still not the case. Like running a small business is still running a small business, and leadership is still leadership.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like, you think you have it all laid out because it's a franchise and they have all the tools for you, but are you actually using them? And some people aren't.
That's a good point.
So for this particular location, she had 2 locations. She was like, well, I'm not to the point yet where why do I need a manager? I should just be able to have a shift leader. But we end up finding out that her team members weren't feeling the support that they needed from her when she would show up or when she wasn't there, because she was just like, you guys should know what you're doing. You're on your own. You're good. You have a shift leader. You're in charge when you're here. The shift leader's changes all the time. But her team members really didn't know who to go to for questions. And why is this person's a shift leader one time, but now this other person's a shift leader? And it just caused a lot of confusion. So with it, we really sat everything down. We said, okay, what is it that you need? And we looked at everything. We gathered feedback from her employees. We looked at across the numbers, and we said, what you actually need is you're going to manage one of the locations and you need a manager for the other location. And as the business owner for those things, you'll still pop in at times to make sure things are going as they should. And, but they're like, you can't be managing day to day as you're managing the day to day over there, because your team members don't feel supported. If something comes up, they feel like they're left on an island figuring out how to do it on their own versus actually having someone to go to. And the people that are there, the team members, don't have the skills to actually be that manager of that location. So we were able to then bring in a manager for their one location. And from there, they stopped having employee turnover, which meant they stopped having to go through that hiring and firing cycle because the team felt supported there. They were able to grow their business. They were able to bring in more clients in both. She wasn't spending as much time jumping back and forth. It was just once a week, she'd go to the second location, check in person, how everything was doing. Because that was one thing that we heard was they wanted that in-person touch point at least once a week to say, okay, this is who we're working for. This is who owns the place. This is who's setting our goals and things like that. And then she was able to grow both locations. And then eventually get to the point where, because she also owned another business, this wasn't her only business, where she then was able to get a manager for the location where she was managing, and being able to step more out of that to focus on her other business, which then she was able to grow as well.
So she got better at it. She learned.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I got to tell you, so one of the things that I feel like I've learned as a business owner too is, and one of the most difficult things to do is, like you get that feeling like, man, I just need more help. But you look at the bottom line and you're like, how do I even afford to pay for somebody who might be able to step into this role? Like, let's just use an example. Maybe one of the same example and this is hypothetical because I don't know the business you're talking about, but maybe the gross revenues were $500,000. The net revenues were, let's just call it gross profit, a couple $100,000. That only leaves, and you would have a couple employees. They might make $45,000 to $60,000 each. So then you're only left with, call it $75,000, $80,000 to do everything else and pay yourself.
Right.
Right. So now, like when I'm hearing, okay, I have to go hire a manager that now I have to pay $75,000 to, and so all of a sudden, like all of that profit might be gone, or you might even have to go negative in order to bring in that person. But ultimately, in theory, what happens is you're able to do things faster, better. So the quality goes up. You probably increase your revenues because of retention of clients. Word of mouth grows. So like in theory, if you're hiring the right people, it pays for itself. It's one of the best things you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Even though on the short term, it might be kind of painful.
Yes, exactly. And I talk clients through this a lot. Well, I don't really get too much into the numbers with them. I'm always like, okay, let's bring in your accountants and things like that to really understand your numbers. And we'll just look at it from a hiring perspective. We always look at things from one or two ways. It's like, first off, if you know you're going to have to make that higher level hire, sometimes we have to save to get there. I remember one of my clients was a financial advisor. And at that point in time, we were helping him hire just an assistant for his office. But he's like, okay, if this assistant works out well and I'm able to go bring on in more business, eventually I'm going to need a second of me. He goes,
it's ironic that this person's a financial advisor.
Right. And that's one of the things, like I say, the cobbler's children has no shoes. And I'm just like, okay, but he goes, okay, but in order to go from the jump of me to two of me, if I want to bring in someone good, even if they're going to make a lot of money off of like commission and or however they work their fees and everything there, I'm going to have to pay someone to come in at first until their book of business gets to the point where it is
2-3 years.
So, and he goes, I don't want to bring in someone who's struggling. I want to really bring in someone who I can pay until they get there, because how can I afford to pay them until they're there if the business isn't there to support them? And I looked at him, I was like, well, what would you tell your clients if they want to make a really big purchase, a really big investment, and they don't have the money right now? And he's like, I would tell them to save a little bit each month. So that way they have it. And I was like,
that's clever.
Great. I was like, you're not ready to make that hire right now, but you know it's in your goals. You know it's in your future. So every month, put a little bit aside. And so you have a bank there that you can pay this person until that role is producing the revenue that it needs to pay itself. Yeah. And like I said, like, the financial advisor is like, oh, that's right. That's what I would tell people to do. And now I need to do it myself. Yeah, so some of it is, if we know we're going to grow our business, if that's goals that we have is to eventually have more team members, what do we need to be doing today to get us prepared for that? So sometimes we do have to stock some money away, because a position isn't going to come out the gate paying for itself. But when we do hire team members and we look at who we need to bring in our team, we want that positive ROI. And sometimes that ROI, we're going to look at it and say, with my current budget, I can hire someone. They're going to take 40 hours of work off my plates. I get to go focus on something else. And I don't care if I ever make an additional dime off of having that person there, because my budget can cover it. And that we look at time ROI. They're saving you time. Time is all that matters to you right now. And you can cover it in your budget.
That to me is the best, but it's hard to get there because margins are thin.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That is nice, but it's not the reality that most of us live in. Most of us need that financial ROI. So what we need to look at to say, if I bring this position into my team and it costs me this amount, how do I grow my revenue to cover that plus some? And we have to look at it. There's two different ways. Does that position earn us revenue? So if I'm bringing in a salesperson, well, I know that salesperson needs to bring in X amount in order for this person's salary and commission and benefits and whatever else I'm paying them in order to be worth it. So they need to bring in more than I'm paying them. If they're not in a direct revenue generating position, we then need to look at the indirect revenue generating that's going to go on because I have this person. If I'm bringing in an assistant that's going to help me, what am I doing with that time that's being saved? How am I going to bring in more revenue? Am I bringing in someone to help me behind the scenes with the bookkeeping and the administrative tasks so I can go hunting for more clients, or so I can have more hours to serve clients? So think of it, we have to think of it that way, as like, what does my business gain because this position comes in? So for the example that I was given before, she was able to retain more clients. They were able to serve more clients in their place of business because they weren't having that employee turnover. Because when they had someone leave, they had fewer hours where they could actually serve clients. And so they were able to keep clients happy. They were able to have more hours available. And so it really increased and stabilized their revenue that they were able to bring in each location, which more than covered the cost of that manager.
Are you seeing any patterns with these people that you're working with where, like, in general, entrepreneur founds a business, and then the type of their early hires, like, what are you seeing in terms of those roles of those early hires in the business that help the business to be more successful?
I would say the best early hires are the assistant type positions. Now that can look different. It could be your administrative assistant, like your executive assistant that's just kind of helping behind the scenes, doing some of that work, taking that off your plate so you can actually focus on the revenue generating work. But with some of my clients, it's kind of like a junior them. So it's someone that's also helping with the type of work that they're doing for their clients. But in both ways, it's taking that lower level tasks off their plate so they can focus on the higher level tasks, the things that their clients are actually paying them for. Now, every client wants us to be on time with our emails and our deliverables and have them look great and things like that. But no matter what business you're in, they're hiring you for an outcome. So you need to be able to focus on the work that's going to deliver that outcome and have someone else behind the scenes that's helping you with all the details that go into that outcome, whether it is the business administrative things or the client administrative things for the projects.
So if I'm a business owner and I am trying to determine, like, how would I know that I need to hire someone like you? Yeah. What would those symptoms be? What were those symptoms?
So to hire someone like me to support them through the process?
Yes.
Yeah. So great question.
Because typically an entrepreneur is going to try to do it themselves.
Yes. So if you're sitting there saying, I don't even know where to start with hiring, you think I'm just going to post a job out there somewhere, like a now hiring sign, and I'm going to get great hires. But you're like, well, what do I do? How do I identify if someone is the right person? That's when you really need to come to me.
But even before that, where it's like, what does that pain look like? What is that symptom of, like, it's time to hire?
It's time to hire. So that they just need to hire in general before. Okay. So I always say there's 4 main signs in a business that it's time to hire. And I encourage all business owners at least once a quarter to kind of review their business to see one of these signs are there, because we're so close to our business and things don't a lot of times happen overnight. Maybe we know we got that huge contract, but a lot of times it happens very slowly that these things come up and we just keep going. So the first one is we're saying no to our ideal client. So people want to work with us, but we're saying, I can't take on that business right now. Or if someone is product-based, your products are selling out. So you're always behind on your inventory versus being ahead on your inventory. Another way to look at this is if you have a wait list, but your wait list is not working for you. So in some businesses, having a wait list is a sign of I'm in demand, so I can charge higher prices and people are going to stay around because they really want to work with me. In other businesses, a wait list just means people want to give you their money now and you're saying no, but you really want that money now because you have goals. And
what would a business like that be?
That has a wait list that's working against them?
Yes.
So I would say anything where your projects are term-based and you have to wait till one project ends before another one comes on, but you're trying to grow your revenue. So you're at this thing where you're stuck, where it's like, I want to bring in more revenue, but I can't bring in more revenue because I don't have the hours to work on those additional projects. So I have to finish this project before I can take on the next one. So for me for some of our clients, we do full service recruiting. So for me, it would say, well, I can't start this recruiting project until 3 weeks from now, because that's when we'll be done with the bulk of the work on this other project.
So almost like if you have a product or service where maybe the price is kind of set,
mm-hmm.
and you're stuck because really the factor in whether or not you're going to grow is throughput.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. So, yep, you can't charge more. So it's not like you can be, I'm so in demand, I'm going to charge more for my services, because people will say, Well, there's a ceiling. There's a ceiling of what you can charge, because either there's a ceiling of what people are willing to pay for that, or there's a ceiling of what they're willing to pay you for that, because you haven't proven yourself enough to say, I'm worthy of this higher price point for my projects. So that's the first one. Like you're saying no to work that you would really like that revenue now.
Yeah.
So if you brought in more team members, you could produce more work and grow your revenue. Sign number 2 is your customer service is dropping. So clients want to be treated well. They want, if you tell them they're going to get something in 2 days, they want it to show up in 2 days. They don't want it to have to wait 2 weeks for something, or they don't want to have to be following up with you to be like, hey, you told me you're going to send this to me. Where is it?
That might also be a time to fire, not just hire.
Yep. But sometimes you have to look at it as the reason that it's not getting done is because there's a lack of time. So a lot of these have to do with time. So
that's a good point.
It might be you yourself that's falling behind on that.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're just like, oh my gosh, I had so much on my plate. I haven't even been able to dedicate the time to this. So it's not that anyone is doing a poor job and letting things slip by. It's your team member is also working 60 hours a week to try to stay ahead of deadlines, and they just can't. And so when clients are starting to cancel contracts, not come back, not refer you, leaving bad reviews because of your customer service, that's when it's really time to hire. And we're not talking about clients that are upset because they're expecting you to respond to every email like that.
Yeah.
We're talking about clients that have reasonable expectations, or sometimes the expectations that you set. If you've told them, okay, I'll have this for you in 2 days, and it's taking 2 weeks, well, they have a reason to be upset.
Absolutely.
If they're always having to follow up with you, they have a reason to be upset because they don't feel valued as a client anymore. So they're going to take their business elsewhere. Also, if you're in a business, like some good examples of this are like real estate or a plumber or things like that, where when someone calls you, sometimes you're not the only person that they're calling for see if you would take on that business. So if by the time you call people back when they're inquiring about your business, you're always hearing, oh, I've already gone with someone else, then that's a lack of customer service as well. And you might need someone that's going to help you answer those phone calls.
So you've identified you need to hire. So now what's the next step?
Yeah. So the next step is really looking into what is that role that's going to produce the best ROI. So for example, that lack of customer service is that you need someone that's going to help assist doing those projects, or do you need someone that's going to be that point of contact for your clients that's going to be answering the phone? So I worked with someone in the realtor before, and she realized that the amount of clients and opportunities she was missing because the fact that she doesn't answer her phone when she's with clients more than made up for what she would have to pay someone to simply answer the phone. So she hired that assistant to answer her phone, and that was the main job. And she was able to get on so many more, take on so many more houses and sales and things like that, and buyer opportunities that it paid for that position itself. So it's kind of figuring out what do you need to solve the problem.
That's very relatable. That was the first hire we made at this business, where what we did is we hired somebody that could handle the media buying, because when I started this business in my living room and I was doing the media buying as well as everything else, we had enough of that to where I could give that to a new person, at least on a part-time basis, to help get that off my plate. And I know it was getting done well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's sometimes where people will say, well, if I'm going to hire someone simply to answer the phone, what about all the time when the phone's not ringing? And it's like, well, sometimes in positions you could give them other projects to do that are kind of maybe those administrative type projects to do. But other times you have to look at it as the value of them answering that phone is worth them having downtime. I know one of my first jobs out of college, when I was still trying to figure out what exactly do I want to do, I was a receptionist. I sat around a lot, not doing anything but reading magazines. But the value to the company to have me there at the front desk when someone walked in, and that client didn't have to wait for someone to walk up or ring a bell, was worth it for them. The fact that they could be in a client meeting and someone was there answering the phone, and whoever was on the other end of that phone felt supported, was worth it to them. So they didn't care that there was that downtime in between, because they were getting the value from the work that I was actually doing.
You know, I literally had just a random conversation this morning that's related to this. So someone called our main line, and right now the main lines are forwarded to me because we're switching phone services. And I was just like, I just need to make sure calls don't get dropped. And it was a young man who was in high school asking how to break into the automotive industry, and he likes taking pictures. And I'm thinking, like, am I getting punked right now? But it was interesting because, like, you were mentioning your story about being a receptionist. There's also people that are like eager to do those jobs, to at least through osmosis get into that industry.
Yeah.
You know, like your first job, what was the industry?
So it was actually a receptionist job at an advertising agency, because I knew at that point in time, I was like, I want to go into advertising and marketing, but I had no idea exactly what I wanted to do with inside advertising and marketing. And I saw this receptionist job open up, and I was just like, what a great place to go and learn about all the different positions.
Because through osmosis, you're going to hear conversations and you're going to understand like the dynamics of like how an account is even structured. Like the people coming in might be the vendors, they might be clients, whatever. But by osmosis, you're going to get experience in the business. And literally, what I told this young man was, "Hey, the easiest way to break into this industry." And they wanted to know how to get into the automotive industry doing photography and videography content. And I was like, number one, make sure you have the skills. So go to Skillshare, pay the $10 a month and take all the classes to make sure you know how to use your camera. Number two, look at the stuff that they're producing now and then see if you can replicate it, and replicate it on your own car. And if you're driving a 20-year-old beater, maybe they'll appreciate the humor that you can sell your,
right,
your 2002 Camry the same way they're selling a 2025 Camry or whatnot, right? And but the fact that you can demonstrate that you have some of that work. And then I was like, there are literally companies that's all they do is go to car dealerships and do some of this. So research who those companies are, show them your portfolio, and you can break into the industry. But like, it just occurred to me while you were talking that not only are you, when you're looking to hire somebody, you're thinking about the cost and the opportunity, but there's also people that are like really eager to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also one of those things, I forget, I was talking to someone recently and they had switched industries. And it was a big switch of what they were doing. Their career path was one thing, and then they decided, I am not happy over here. I'm going to go do something else. And no one would hire them at first at the level where they thought they should be because they didn't have experience in that particular industry. He said, okay, I'm going to go get pretty much an entry-level job here, and I'm going to work my way up, and I'm going to show people what I can do, because once I have a foot in the door, it's a lot easier to climb your way up the ladder. So there are some people who are just really eager to get any of that experience.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So now that you have identified that you need to hire the person, you've identified which role you're hiring for, what's next?
Yeah. So the next thing is kind of going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, becoming really clear on your ideal candidates. We know they need to do this. Now, what does that look like inside your organization? What is going to make you happy? So a lot of times I'll break it down with my clients, or what are your must-have things, your non-negotiables about what it means to be successful in this role, what skills someone needs to have, and then what are the nice-to-have things? Kind of, well, if they have 3 out of these 5 things, great, but they don't necessarily need all of them. If they have this industry experience, great, but they don't necessarily need it. I could train them on the job, but it would be nice if they already have this type of stuff. So once we really break it down to that, like if they tell me something is a must-have, okay, why? Why does someone need the skill? Or what does this actually look like in your business? I was just working on a new project where they said, okay, these are the 5 things that this person needs. I said, why? And what does this look like inside your business? Because if you tell me I need someone that's detail-oriented, does that mean someone who can make sure they're reviewing a document that someone else put together and catch every mistake? Or you could say to someone, this is what we need to do. And they're like, okay, if we need to do this, then we need to do X, Y, Z to get there. I'm going to create the project plan, and then I'm going to oversee it and execute it and get it done. Like, what do you mean by detail-oriented?
Yeah.
And so really becoming clear on what that candidate looks like. Who's going to be successful in that position, because then that's who we're going after. And I always say it's very similar to marketing. If you don't know who your target audience is in marketing, who cares? Like, you're not going to put out the thing that's right. You're not going to put out the thing that's most likely going to work and bring in the right person. So it's the same with hiring, is like, if you don't know who you want to hire and know those details about that person, your job post is never going to land with the right person. You're most likely not going to select the right person when you go to interview. So you need to be very clear on who it is that is going to be successful in that role.
And it sounds like you're doing a lot of work with them to help them figure
Yes.
out their job description before you do the job post.
Yes. Yep. So with all our clients, all our consulting and recruiting clients, we take them through a hiring kickoff call where I ask them a series of questions to really uncover who this person is, because a lot of times we're so close to our business that we don't know who that is. We can't articulate it.
This feels more involved than what a normal recruiter would do.
Yes. Yep. That's really what our specialty is I've had clients or potential clients come to me in the past. They're like, okay, well, I need to hire XYZ title. Can you get me a candidate tomorrow? And I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? I can go to this other recruiting firm and they're going to get me a candidate tomorrow. I said to them, I was just like, but how do you know that's the right candidate? How do they know they're giving you the right candidate? I was like, you're just telling them you want someone with this title. They're going to go and give you someone that could potentially fulfill that title. I was like,
yeah,
I care about who you're going to be working with. I care if this person is going to be with you for 2 days or 12 years because we find the right person. It's about you being happy and this person actually being able to do the job versus simply being able to hold a title.
Well, let's go into the next step, which is really reviewing resumes.
Yeah.
So you've made the post. Now all of a sudden you're getting resumes.
Yes. Okay. So this is one of my favorite parts of the process. I know a lot of people hate it because they're like, oh my gosh, I get so many resumes to review. Or it's the complete opposite. And they're like, I'm getting no resumes. Like, what do I do? And so if you're on the side where you're not getting really any resumes, I just always ask the questions of like, but are the ones you're getting good quality resumes? We don't need 200 resumes for a position.
Oh, please, we don't want to.
We don't want. But people then freak out if they're only getting like 5.
Mhm.
And I was like, but if 3 of those 5 people are people you want to hire, who cares that it's only 5?
Right.
So we really need to look at like, who are we getting? Are they the people we want to really bring in for interviews and eventually hire? So when you're reviewing resumes, I feel like people spend way too much time here because they try to determine the candidate's life story based off of a piece of paper. And they try to read between the lines, or they decide to bring someone in for an interview because of things that don't really matter. So the way I always teach my clients to review a resume is going back to that must-have and nice-to-have criteria. We want to look for 3 must-have things on that resume. But they also must be things we can see on a resume. So our must-have criteria that we thought of about who is our ideal candidate, some of that stuff we can't actually tell on a resume. So what can we actually see on a resume that can determine should this person get an interview? And so we no more than 3. For some positions, it's even less. We'll do 2, but no more than 3 must-have things. If a candidate doesn't have these things, we don't want to talk to them. If a candidate does have these 3 things,
that's an easy filter.
Put them, it's an easy filter. And sometimes it's
we don't care if they went to Harvard and are super smart and maybe could learn those things. If they don't have those things, you're out.
Unless you're one of those law firms, it's like, unless you went to Harvard Law School, we want like we don't want anything to do with you. And if that's one of your must-have things, they must have gone to Harvard Law School.
Because that's a huge mistake I make. Like I look at a resume that is not the right fit, and I look at it and it's like my gut's telling me like this person could learn this thing.
Yeah.
And
the thing is, maybe they could, but as a small business, do you have the time and energy for that?
You absolutely do not.
Big businesses, you hear the phrase all the time, get that passionate person on the bus, you can get them in the right seat later. But as a small business, sometimes you're driving a motorcycle with a sidecar. There's no extra seat to move them to. And you don't have the time and energy inside a small business to bring the wrong people. We're talking
about guaranteed productivity. Yeah. Like it has to be productive. Yeah.
So, and it's also your own money if you bring in the wrong person. A big business, you bring in the wrong person, guess what? It's not impacting your paycheck.
It's not even your money. It's just the budget. And if you don't spend your whole budget, then you lose it anyway next year. So
it's so different, but we really want to make sure we get the right person. So it's our must-have things that we're looking at, and then our nice-to-have, which the nice-to-have is really those things. Okay, I said yes to 20 resumes. I don't have time to interview 20 people. So how do I narrow it down?
So you narrow it down. What's a good number for being able to do voice?
Oh, so a good number for interviews. I actually hate answering this question because I think if we set a number, a lot of times we cut people off that we should be interviewing because we're like, nope, I said I was only going to do 10. Because I actually had a client like that in the past. He said, okay, I was only going to interview 5 people, but there's 6 resumes that I really like. Help me decide which one to cut out. And we talked about it, and I was just like, you just need to do 6 interviews.
Yeah.
Like when we set this number, then we get stuck on this number versus are we bringing the right people in?
Right.
So I think that you need to look at your time availability. And if you say yes to 20 resumes and you really only have time to interview 10 people, okay, how do we prioritize which 10? So we're not saying
Right.
no to the other 10. We're saying, I need to prioritize 10 first. And if I don't get someone from those 10, then let's go deeper into
So
the
is there
pile.
like a thing you should do with the 10 that didn't make it that you might want to talk to if you have
Yeah,
time?
sometimes it's just letting them know we received your resume, we're reviewing things, and we'll be in touch if we want to schedule an interview. To let them know that it's been received, that you're not telling them they're really in that maybe pile yet, but you're just letting them know that, acknowledging we received your resume, we're still going through all of them, we'll be in contact.
You've got flexibility there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, like I said, like we really don't want to set a number because it really just pigeonholes us. Also, if we say we're going to interview 10 people and then we only five, I've seen people then just stress out, like, I need to fill these other 5 spots. And it's like, well, no, focus on who is right for an interview.
Yeah.
Also, that's one of the things where working with the recruiter is beneficial because that's our job. If there's 20 people that are qualified,
that's literally your job. Like, you're the filter.
Yeah, we're going to interview all 20 people if 20 resumes are qualified, because that's our job, and we're not trying to fit it in with everything else going on. Where if you're going to narrow it down to only 5 people or 10 people, who are you cutting off that actually could be your great hire? But you're making that decision solely on a piece of paper. So even though they have everything you're looking for, you're cutting them off just simply because you don't have time.
So you've got the right people, you're ready to do the interview, you do the interview, and you is there a process you have about how to do that interview that we should talk about? Or should we talk about, hey, you've done the interview and now it reminds me of like episodes of Friends back before, like dating sites where it's like, should I call her back? Should I wait a couple days? Do I need to look too desperate? It's like, how do you determine?
So I'll give you a few tips on all of that. So first off, always have an interview plan. So an interview question guide. Always have your questions prepared ahead of time. Don't go in and wing it. Have your questions prepared ahead of time. And each one of those questions should tie back to that idea candidate. So we're not having generic interview guides where we ask the same interviews questions for all of our positions. You should have a different guide for each one of your positions. And every question ties back to, this is my idea candidate.
But
this is something I need to know. Here's a question that's going to help me figure out that information.
So be scientific about it within the role. Ask the same questions at least.
Yeah. So within a role, you're going to ask someone else, you're going to ask every candidate for this position the same questions. And there are some questions for your interview guides from position A to position B that will filter over, because some of your questions are about, are they a culture fit and things like that. So there's going to be like, ooh, this is going to help me figure out, do they work well inside this organization? Where other ones are going to be, can they actually do the job?
What happens if one of the candidates is very charismatic and it's like, you want to ask them are you allowed to ask different follow-up questions?
You can ask follow-up questions all day. When we build our interview question guides, we actually build in a lot of follow-up questions, because one of the things I always say is we don't want to lead the witness. So sometimes we don't want to go straight out the gate telling them exactly what we want to hear, but then we might need to direct them to that to the topic, or being like, okay, that was a great example, but do you have an example in this industry or something like that, or change, like kind of directing them a little bit more. But follow-up questions are fine. Unless, I know there's a lot of rules. If you're hiring for government positions, you have to ask all the same questions. And sometimes you're not allowed to ask follow-up questions because you didn't ask it to another candidate. But when you're in your own small business, you make the rules. If there's a follow-up question that is needed, ask that follow-up question. If you're going through that interview guide and says, okay, well, based on how the candidate answered this question, I'm running out of time and I don't need to answer this question because it's more important for me to get information over here.
So don't stress out about super explicit.
Yeah. So it's about having that guide so you can compare candidates apples to apples. But if you need to ask something else, ask it. If there's a reason to skip a question with a candidate, skip it. There's times I'll be going with a candidate and I'll say, all right, in your answer for here, you already gave me a great example that supports this as well. So I'm going to ask you the question anyway, in case you have another example that comes top to mind that you want to share. But if not, I think I already got everything I need from this, so we can just move on. You don't have to be so strict with it.
How long should an interview last?
So a first round interview, I always say there should be at least 2 rounds.
Okay.
The first round interview, 30 minutes or less. I would say budget 30 minutes. If you don't use the whole 30 minutes, that's fine. But on your calendar, you probably at least want to schedule everything for 30 minutes or less. Second round interview, typically I say schedule an hour. You might not necessarily use a full hour, but if that candidate has questions, you want to have time for their questions as well. You want to be able to have a little bit more of that conversation if needed after you get through all your questions, or tell them more about the role and things like that, and give them the time that they need. So at least 30 minutes for the first round and an hour for the second round.
Okay, we found our candidate. What's next?
Making an offer.
So do you call them right away? Like on the way home, are they driving home and they get a call from you, or do you wait till tomorrow?
I would say in most cases, put a little bit of time in there.
Okay.
One thing you absolutely do not want to do is offer them the position on the spot.
Okay.
That sometimes just seems a little bit too desperate. Because it's like, okay, like as much as we want to feel like, yay, I did a great job, like I got the job, and you want to know as a candidate side, it also feels a little bit desperate. Like you show that you could do a little critical thinking, you thought through things and things like that. And even if it's that same day, just put a little bit of time there. Because you also want to, one of the biggest reasons for it is you want to take the time to put together the right offer for that candidate.
Yeah.
So unless you're hiring a position that says, no matter what, this is the pay, there is no negotiating room, the pay is this, you need to figure out, okay, now what exactly within the range that I had out there, where does this person fall? If this person comes back and negotiates, what is my ceiling? When do I say no to a candidate because they want more than I'm willing to give them? And things like that. And you want to be prepared, because if they come back and try to negotiate and you're not prepared, I've seen too many small businesses give candidates things that they can't actually afford. And then you're starting in the red with a candidate.
It's a lose-lose then.
Yeah.
You know, so that's no good.
Yep.
All right. So you've made the offer, they've accepted. Now, what do you got to do to ensure that there's going to be a success?
So prepare for onboarding. And one of the things I'll say is onboarding really starts before that candidate comes in on day one. I've seen a small business lose their new team member because they made that offer, that candidate said yes, and the business is like, well, I don't need to contact them again until day one when they show up. And it's like, well, that was 3 weeks away because timing and everything for that business. So I was like, the candidate needs something to say, we actually want you to come into our business. So at least some point between when they said yes and that person is starting, have some sort of, we're really excited to have you join our team email that goes out. Send out an email that says what to expect on day one.
There's benefits paperwork.
Yeah. Well, sometimes this will go back and forth depending on where you're located and what your rules are. But a lot of HR people will tell you, as much as you want to get ahead of the game with benefits, is I think there's some gray area here, but a lot of HR people will tell you that technically that person is supposed to get paid to do that paperwork. So if you're having them, but it goes back and forth there. So
you know, there's like things you can do to be like, hey, get ready for your first day.
Yeah,
like, how do you want to set up your computer?
Yeah. So
you know, like what username?
Yeah. So if there's options for that, sending that stuff out, because you want to make sure they're prepared. You don't want to be setting up their computer after they arrive. So there's information that you need, making sure that you have that information before they come in day one. Some of the stuff is letting them know what to expect on day one. If it's an in-person job, what time do they show up? Because sometimes maybe they'll start their normal work day at 9 a.m., but you have a staff meeting every morning at 9 a.m. and it's not right for them to join that staff meeting on day one. So you want them to show up at 10 o'clock after that meeting instead. It's the only day they'll be showing up late, but you don't want them there at 9 o'clock on day one. So 10 o'clock is better. Is it some of those things? Well, they walk through the front door for their interview, but all your staff typically comes in a different entrance because that front door is not open at that point in time because it's locked because customers so customers can't come in. So they need to come in the back. Well, how do they get there? Where should they park? Because they're no longer a visitor. So is it all parking out front visitor parking? Where should they park? Where's staff parking? What's going on for lunch on day one? That's one of the things that people forget. Are you taking this new hire out to lunch? You don't have to, but if you are, letting them know. Do they have a lunch break from X time to Y time? Okay, let them know. Does the entire staff bring their lunch and sit in a break room together? And it'd be really great for them to do that on day one so they can get to know the team. Let them know so they know to bring food if they want.
That's nice. So just it's like the guideline is like conscientious. Just be thinking like, what would the things be that would make you feel more comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's things that you know it because you're there working there every day, but they know nothing. They're walking in and it's like, I have no idea what's behind that door, what I'm expected of, what's expected of me. And even if you're hiring someone that's a remote worker in a virtual environment, what do things look like on day one? Are they going to be sitting there in a computer for 8 hours in training? Are there going to be breaks? What does that look like? When are they going to receive the Zoom login or whatever platform that you use? So.
Yeah. Like I'm thinking about our video team, like we wouldn't want to scare them. So ask them to wear sleeves that day. Things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just teasing them because they're editing this. But
but it's one of those things when you think about like what is the dress like? Because there's some people that show up for interviews and they're going to be wearing their business attire because that's what they've been trained to go in interviews. And then if they show up on day one and they're wearing their tie and everyone else is in shorts and t-shirts because you're a really casual company, but the way you set up your interviews, they didn't get to see that environment.
Yes, I totally get it.
Or if you're a company that everyone wears a uniform.
So can you send them the company handbook ahead of time?
Yeah, I would say you can send them.
If it addresses dress code and some things.
Or maybe you could send them the company handbook and let them know that they will have time to read through it and sign it on day one, but they might have some questions in there. Some of their questions might be answered or things like that, or just pull out the things that are important for them to know, like for dress code or things like that.
That's really good advice. I mean, I think if we follow that guide, I think you'll have a much more successful leading up to the first day. And then obviously the training program and all of that is a whole nother animal in itself.
Yeah. Yep.
But one of the last questions I wanted to get to, one of the most important things to me right now is AI, how it's changing everything. Like the entrepreneurs are getting even more done by themselves without having to hire people because they're able to offload certain tasks because they're more efficient with AI and whatnot. Like, how are you seeing this like enter your world?
Yeah. So I will say AI has been a part of the recruiting process for a really long time, but it's also not great. So what I mean by that is almost any job board that you'll post things to, they have things where it'll sort through the resumes that come in and tell you who's a good candidate and who's not. And everyone I know who has tested it out says typically the person they end up hiring, the AI and the recruiter platform has put them in the no pile. So I don't think when it comes to that of sorting candidates and sorting resumes, it's where it needs to be yet. Mm-hmm. But I think the only way that it's going to get there is when people use it and provide feedback.
Yeah.
So that's one of the areas where I say we really need to have people involved in the interview process. There's also things where it's like, well, we'll have our candidates record videos and then have AI analyze them and then tell us who to hire. People need to be involved in the hiring process. Yeah. You're going to be working with these people. There's ways AI can support the hiring process.
Unless you're hiring a podcaster.
Yeah. So there's ways it can support.
You can talk to a camera very comfortably.
But we have to let it support the process, not take over parts of the process.
Right.
So what I really have used AI a lot recently is with research and with sparking ideas. So I won't have AI write a job post for me, but I might, it's one of those days where I'm just like, I'm really stuck. How do I phrase this? And might put in some of the prompts to say, okay, like put this in like this type of format for me. I need someone that does X, Y, Z. I'm having a really hard time like coming up with the sentences myself, and it puts that there. Or if I'm like, okay, give me wanting to make sure that my candidate or my clients are thinking of everything that, because we're creating new positions a lot of times, are they thinking about everything that should go into these positions and tasks? Or are there other things that we should consider adding to the job description that we haven't thought of during the conversation? So sometimes instead of me having to now go and research job post after job post after job post to pull those things, to be like, okay, what are the top 20 tasks that someone of this job title would do within a small business, and get some of those ideas turning. So I can go back to my clients and say, hey, would your team member be doing this or these, or here's some of the things to put in there. So a lot of that idea generating, some of that, give me 5 interview questions that would help me uncover XYZ about a candidate.
That's a really good one.
So some of those things where then I can pull it out to say, and this is one of the things that I found is a lot of times what it produces for me, it's not perfect, but I can say, ooh, I really like how it phrased that and that question and this question. And if I tie it together, or if I have this question and follow up with this other question that they have, that's really going to pull out the right information from a candidate. So I think AI is great, and tools like ChatGPT and everything to help do some of that research quickly, and help produce ideas that then you can use to enhance your process. But once again, like with hiring, you're working with these people. There needs to be that person connection. And it's not to the place where it needs to be to do this, the sorting for you. So you need to be involved in that, but use it to help guide you in the right direction.
That's really good advice. Where can we follow you and more of your thought leadership? Where do we find your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast, it's available on all the major podcasting platforms, but you can also go to growingyourteam.com/podcast to find all our episodes there. And you can find out more of just what we do in general at growingyourteam.com.
And you're located right here in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yes, I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida.
One of the most amazing and beautiful places in all the whole country, I think.
Yes, I love it.
That's great. Well, you can find us anywhere where podcasts are found across the social media feeds of Bake More Pies and the Law of Relevancy. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.